Activist Radio is on the air. You have tuned into the Mark Harrington Show, sponsored by Created Equal. Mark is training a new generation of leaders to take on the culture of death and win.
You don't like abortion, don't have one.
The only thing that can be said to be objective truth is that there is no objective truth.
It does come out in one piece. It comes out in one piece.
I would argue that we certainly are not all created equal.
And now, here's Mark.
Hello, Mark Harrington here, coming to you live from Created Equal Studios in Columbus, Ohio. And folks, we want to talk about something today, and that is, who are the real terrorists out there? The reason I bring that up is because last night we had went up to Toledo, Ohio to be part of a hearing on a buffer zone law for the last remaining abortion clinic in Toledo. And at least 10 times, maybe a dozen times, abortion advocates called people like myself terrorists. We're terrorists. Why are we terrorists? Because we say mean things to them. At least that's what they said anyway. And we want to talk about that today on the Mark Harrington Show, because this term terrorists, terrorism, fascism is thrown about here and there to define conservatives, pro-lifers like myself. And so we want to talk about who the real terrorists are. But before we do that, I need to report to you what happened last night in the Toledo buffer zone hearing there before the Toledo City Council. Now, if you've been following us on Facebook, you already get an idea of what's happening here, hopefully. I've reported on this several times in the last couple of weeks, and so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it today, but I need you to understand what's going on. This law, or I should say ordinance, is called the Impeding Access to Healthcare Ordinance. Impeding Access to Healthcare Ordinance. And in it, there are basically several provisions. The first is the impeding access to an abortion clinic, which number one says that you can't physically obstruct or block a person entering or exiting an abortion clinic. And it also deals with disorderly conduct. And then the third thing down at the bottom there is that it says this, that a person cannot, prohibited to engage in a course of conduct or repeatedly commit acts within a 20 feet of the premises of a healthcare facility, i.e. abortion mill or death pit, when the behavior places another person in reasonable fear of physical harm or attempt to do the same. So what I want to do here, just for a few seconds, and then we're going to get into this whole discussion of who's a real terrorist in America, right, and around the world, is I want to unpack this, because people need to understand what this law is intended to do. All right. First of all, let's deal with this question of whether the issue of impeding access to health care and a law that supposedly is going to increase the penalties for pro-life advocates like myself and others who would physically obstruct an abortion clinic. All right. So when I presented in front of City Council yesterday, I brought up this point. I said, listen, I expected to come here and hear evidence from the other side, those who are proposing this ordinance, evidence of people regularly impeding and blocking the access to the abortion clinic. And what I heard was people coming up and saying over and over again how mean pro-lifers are and how they say things that are unkind and that they're offensive and they're disturbing and stuff like that. That's all we heard. Not one shred of evidence of anybody blocking access to an abortion clinic, just that pro-lifers are mean. Now, I'm not mean. I don't think the ones that I know of, pro-lifers, they aren't mean either. But anyway, that's what these folks said. They didn't bring up any evidence of anybody blocking an abortion clinic at all during this entire hearing. Here's the bottom line. If they really want to discourage people from impeding access to an abortion clinic or blocking access to it, it's already been done. There's a law in the book since 1993, signed by Bill Clinton, called the Freedom to Access Clinic Entrances Law. Okay? It was passed. It's 25 years. It's been on the books. And in that law, it makes it, for the first offense, it makes it a 6-month term in federal prison and up to $10,000 a fine if you block access to an abortion mill. So let me ask, this is the question I asked counsel. I asked them this. If you think that passing an ordinance that is going to make impeding access to an abortion clinic or blocking it a first-degree misdemeanor is going to discourage anybody from doing this, I think you're on the wrong path, because if they're not going to be discouraged in blocking from blocking an abortion clinic access because the fines are 6 months in jail and $10,000, 6 months in federal prison, a federal crime, then making it a first-degree misdemeanor isn't going to do it either, right? So that was number one. Number two is this whole issue of buffer zones. We've dealt with this on this program several times in the past, but it is worth repeating this whole thing. Here's the deal with the buffer zones. Okay, this law supposedly, and if you would, Mr. Producer, go back to it. I want to read that portion. It says this: the ordinance prohibits engaging in a course of conduct, okay, or repeatedly committing acts within 20 feet of the premises which places another person in reasonable fear of physical harm or attempt to do the same. All right, here we are. Bubble zones, buffer zones. We've talked about this in the past. First of all, they're entirely unenforceable. Now think about this. If you're going to have a 20-foot buffer, and so what I did at the city council hearing is I got out my trusty tape measure. All right, trusty tape measure, and I basically asked council this. I said, okay, let's say you pass this buffer zone or this bubble zone or safe zone or whatever you want to refer to it as. Who's going to carry the tape measure out there from city government and, you know, place this tape measure 20 feet between the pro-life advocate and the pro-abortion supporter, or a woman going inside to get an abortion? Are you guys going to go out? Is city council going to go out there? Are you going to hire folks to go out there and govern what happens on the sidewalk with a tape measure? Who's going to do that? Are the police going to do that? And when police are called, what are they going to do? Get out a tape measure and put this between the pro-lifer and the abortion advocate? Highly unlikely. In fact, the Columbus Police Department said that the city ordinance in Columbus was completely unenforceable because of this very issue. It reduces the First Amendment to a tape measure. Think about this. This is where we're at in America when it comes to First Amendment privileges and rights. It's down to a tape measure, folks. 20 feet. 20 feet between a pro-life advocate and an abortion advocate. And that's what they want to try to do here in Toledo. So it's unenforceable and it's unconstitutional. All right. This buffer zone, this bubble zone. And why is it that pro-abortion advocates have to run to government because they don't like what pro-lifers say? You know, the answer to offensive speech, if let's just grant them the arguments. Let's say that some people are offensive out there. Okay. They say things that might not be kind or what have you. Right. Let's just assume that's the case in some situations. Who runs the government and says, well, listen, these people are being mean to me and I don't like what they're saying. I want you to pass a law to stop them. No, the First Amendment was put into place to protect politically incorrect, disturbing, and offensive speech. There's no other speech that needs protected. politically correct speech or popular speech doesn't need protected, right? So the answer to disturbing speech is more speech, not less. We don't run the government when people say mean things to us. I mean, that's just the way it should work, right? We shouldn't be running the government, but that's what these people do, and here's why: because they're losing. They're losing badly. We're closing abortion clinics. America's becoming more pro-life, and on and on and on. So what they have to do is they have to run the government, their buddies in government, to try to put buffer zones up, safe zones, because they think we're mean. It reminds me of the movie. Remember the Beatles movie, Yellow Submarine, the cartoon? There was a character in that cartoon called the Blue Meanie. Remember the Blue Meanie? He was this guy. He was mean, right? It reminds me of the Blue Meanie. And here's the deal with pro-abortion advocates. They're snowflakes. They're so fragile. They just, this guy said abortion was murder. He called me a murderer. And he said that I was going to go to hell or something like that. It was really offensive, and I was hurt, and they were just mean to me. And because they were mean, I don't want them doing this anymore. And because they're mean, I'm going to run the government. I'm going to get a bubble zone put in place because of the blue meanies out there. Those conservative pro-lifers are blue meanies, like in the Yellow Submarine Beetle movie. I mean, that's the kind of people we have out here. Snowflakes. Folks, get a spine, right? Grow some skin, thick skin. We live in America, right? We don't have the right to be protected from the blue meanie out there. We don't have that right. We're going to be offended. We're going to be disturbed by what people say and do. I mean, that's what's the beauty of the country. People could say what they choose to say, despite the fact that it might offend a few people or be mean. So just because there might be a few blue meanies out there, pro-abortion advocates should not be running the government to try to get these bubble zones. All right? At least that's the way I see things. But they don't see it that way. And here's why. Because they're bullies. Bottom line. They're bullies. They say they don't want to censor speech. They say they don't want to chill speech. They say they don't want to shut down speech. But the bottom line is they want to shut down speech. They want to shut down. Last night, it wasn't about impeding access to health care or to an abortion clinic. It was all about the mean things that pro-lifers say out front of abortion clinics. Bottom line. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about this issue of terrorism. All right? Because last night, abortion advocates, one after the other, came up before Toledo City Council and called pro-life advocates terrorists. Terrorists, over and over again. They're terrorizing me. They're terrorists. This is terror. Terror because we stand in front of a death pit. And by the way, Mr. Producer, if you would, go up, put the picture of the abortion mill from Toledo up there for a second. Look at this place. Folks, I want you to understand what this place looks like. This is the death pit in Toledo. This is the building, and if you want to call it that. Look at it. Would you want to go in there and see a doctor? I don't know about you, but that doesn't look like a doctor's office to me. You know what it looks like to me? It looks like a porno shop. I mean, it's got these bright colors. It's beat up. It could have an adult sign above it, right? And sell pornography inside. It's a blight in the community. Look at it. I mean, it's dirty. I'm sure inside it's nasty. But that's the final. That's the remaining last. That's the last abortion clinic in Toledo. That's what it looks like. But back to this whole issue of terrorism and what is true terrorism. We were called terrorists last night over and over again. And here's the deal. It does us a disservice when we throw about these terms, terrorism and fascism or what have you. It minimizes what real terrorists do. And when they talk about terrorists being pro-lifers because we're blue meanies, or at least they interpret our what we say as being mean or offensive, or their feelings are hurt, they do a disservice to all our men and women in the military who are fighting real terrorists like ISIS. They're the ones. They're beheading people. That's a terrorist. ISIS are terrorists. Pro-lifers are not. Maybe on occasion they may say things that people don't like and offend someone. The Islamic terrorists in the world who were fighting, right? Those, right? We have real domestic terrorists in America. They aren't pro-lifers. Pro-lifers are peaceful, prayerful, and they believe in America. They love liberty, and they believe in the First Amendment. They believe in discourse. They believe in the redress of grievances done the right way, through changing our country one heart at a time and through political measures, not through violence and not through force. But there are real terrorists in America, and they're a lot like the ones over in the Middle East, ISIS and the Taliban. In fact, they look a whole lot like them. If you would, Mr. Producer, put up the picture. These are Antifa protesters. Look at them. They look awful like the one. They cover themselves. They disguise themselves. Why? Because just like those ISIS terrorists, they don't want the world to see who they are, right? The same with Antifa. This is why they disguise who they are. These aren't freedom fighters. These aren't civil rights. Reading about the news in the last couple of weeks here with what's been happening in America as it relates to this whole debate, right, on fascism, so to speak. Antifa supposedly stands for anti-fascist. They're against fascism. They believe that supposedly that Donald Trump is leading a fascist regime to be a dictator, to dictate to the rest of the country what to do, and he's going to force people to do X, Y, and Z, right? So they resort to these acts of violence. They think it's justified to fight against this by using acts of violence and so forth. Well, this happened in Berkeley, okay? Here's what, if you guys weren't watching in Berkeley, here's what happened in Berkeley, all right? There was this group called, they were going to have a march or a rally called No to Marxist America, or No to Marxism in America. That's what it was. No to Marxism in America. And what they did is this group was going to have this rally, which they have the right to do, right? And they're against Marxism. I'm against Marxism. I hope you are too. You know, Karl Marx and all, right? They had this rally, or they were going to, right? So Antifa, these terrorists, the real terrorists, basically showed up. And here's what the Washington Post reports, which, by the way, I mean, think this is the Washington Post reporting this, which is very unusual. Read the title of the article right there. Black-clad Antifa members attack peaceful right-wing demonstrators in Berkeley. I'm shocked that the Washington Post actually used the term peaceful right-wing demonstrators. And they called them black-clad Antifa members, which they are. And if you read this article, here's what happens. You know, this group wants to have this demonstration or this rally, and Antifa shows up. And according to Berkeley's police lieutenant, Joe Okies, 13 of these jackbooted thug terrorists called Antifa were arrested. They were arrested, according to the article, on a range of charges, including assault. That sounds like a terrorist. Assault with a deadly weapon. By the way, when has a pro-lifer done that recently? Yeah, I don't think that's happened recently, if at all. Obstructing a police officer and various Berkeley Municipal Code violations. 13 arrests. Okay. The Berkeley mayor said this. This is part of the problem, by the way. These Antifa people, they go out and they terrorize folks who have the right to demonstrate, whether you agree with them or not, I mean, whether they're neo-Nazi or, whatever, they do have the right to peaceably assemble. You may disagree with them, but again, what I said before, if you don't like the speech that's being presented, the answer is not violence or oppression or force. It's more speech, not less, right? So here's the Berkeley mayor. He says this: I applaud the more than 7,000 people who came out today to peacefully oppose bigotry, hatred, and racism that we saw on display in Charlottesville. He went on to say, however, now, he's got this disclaimer. I wouldn't applaud any of these folks, frankly. I mean, if they're going to do this. But anyway, the peaceable ones, I mean, they can dress as they wish, I guess. But however, the violence that's a small group of protesters engaged in against residents and the police, including throwing smoke bombs. Okay, think about this. When was the last time you saw a pro-lifer throw a smoke bomb? That kind of thing is unacceptable. Fighting hate with hate does not work and only makes each side more entrenched in the ideological camps. True. Now, there's another organization that tried to hold an event in Berkeley, and they got a permit approved by Berkeley, the city of Berkeley. And this event was called, let's see, it had something to do with prayer. Oh, it was, I can't find it. Anyway, this organizer, his name is Amber Cummings, canceled the event because of the threats from Antifa. And he said he canceled it because of the growing tensions that he was witnessing prior to the event. So they had this permit and they canceled it. And he said this, quote, I stress, I do not want anyone coming. He's referring to the folks who are going to come to this event. And if they do, they will be turned away. I'm sorry for this, but I want this event to happen peacefully. And I don't want to risk anyone getting harmed by terrorists. So here you go. Antifa goes and disrupts this event called No to Marxism in America. 13 people arrested. People are beat up. And then this other group who was going to have an event cancels it because of threats from Antifa, because they're afraid of anybody getting hurt. Now, frankly, I can't blame the guy. I mean, who wants to get beat up, right? But two things are happening. First of all, law enforcement isn't cracking down on these folks. And those who organize these events, when they cancel them, they're just giving them more fuel. They're giving Antifa and others more fuel to try to attempt to shut down speech across the country. And the more that they are allowed to do this, the more that these mayors and others just acquiesce and they'll give them space to do their rioting, the more that they're going to be encouraged to do more of it. And so we've got to crack down. There's got to be a change of policy here towards these folks. Free speech is for everybody. And we shouldn't have people shutting down speech. So here, if you're not convinced that the real terrorists are Antifa and the real terrorists are ISIS and the Taliban and those kinds of folks who behead folks across the world, then I just want to show you a couple video clips. You may have seen some of this, but I just want to make the clear juxtaposition between what I heard last night from abortion advocates calling pro-lifers terrorists because we said things that disturbed them, and Antifa, who riot and beat people up. So let's go ahead and play this clip. Now, this is an interview with supposedly a white nationalist. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not for them. They have the right to speak in America. But here's this guy. He's being interviewed, and then this Antifa guy comes up and sucker punches him. Go ahead and play that clip.
Version of the neo-Nazi movement?
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Well, there you go. I mean, listen, he's being interviewed. I don't agree with the guy. A lot of people don't. Most people don't, right? But this is America. People can say stupid stuff. They can stand for things that don't make sense. It doesn't mean we go and sucker punch them. That's what Antifa does. Guy wearing black hood. He's wearing hood. He's got a mask, all that going on. Now, here's another clip. Now, thank God that some of the media is beginning to actually, uncover who these people really are, that they are the real terrorists in this country. They're from the left. They're the real fascists. They say that we're fascists or pro-lifers or conservatives are fascists, but they're the true fascists. And here's why. Let me read a portion of the definition of what fascism is. Here it is. A political philosophy or movement that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader. Now, they say that Trump's that guy. Okay, I mean, come on. He's not forcing anybody to do anything. I think the left, I think Obama was more of a fascist than anybody. But anyway, they would love nothing less than an autocratic government led by a dictatorial leader, as long as he aligns up with them on the left, as long as he's a Marxist. They'd be okay with that. So it says that an autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader and those who forcibly suppress opposition. Antifa. If you want to speak at the University of California at Berkeley and you're a conservative like myself, or if you want to present a pro-life message or anything else like that, or something that's contrary to their views, if you want to support one of President Trump's, positions in public policy, you're going to be met with Antifa. And Antifa is going to do everything it can to shut you down. And if you actually succeed in getting the permit and actually go about the business of speaking, you're going to be faced with violence. You're going to be faced with folks with clubs and shields and mace and smoke bombs and all that kind of thing. If you were to go to the University of California, Berkeley, and try to speak on a conservative issue, that's what's going to happen. So if you don't believe me, go ahead and play this clip. This is from Fox News. It's just kind of a compilation of what's happened in the last week or so. If you don't believe me that the real terrorists are these folks Antifa and those on the left, then watch this video. Now that looks like terrorism to me. They're supposedly anti-fascists. How does that make any sense? All right, that's good enough. Here's the point, folks. We've got real terrorists in America. We have real fascists in America. And here's the thing. I don't want to throw around those words like the left does. If the words fit, then let's use them. Let's not be afraid of it, right? Here are the real terrorists. Mr. Producer, if you put up that picture of the ISIS terrorists right before he beheads a person, put that up. That's a terrorist right there, okay? That's a terrorist, person who does that. not a pro-life advocate, right? Who brings their families, women and children out to abortion clinics to pray, to counsel, right? And to witness against the evil of abortion. In fact, I would go further and I would say this. What does Planned Parenthood and the abortion cartel have in common with those terrorists who behead people? Think about it. Abortion is the dismembering, decapitation, and disemboweling of a human being. That is beheading. See that photo? That is the beheading of a human being. That's what Planned Parenthood does. That's who they are. They're real terrorists here, right? They're actually killing people like ISIS. They're doing what ISIS is doing and beheading folks. So let's get our terms straight. If Antifa says that they're anti-fascist, and yet they stand for everything that is fascist, then let's use that term in the right way to refer to what Planned Parenthood and Antifa is really doing. Antifa's Planned Parenthood's beheading children by abortion, and Antifa is in the business of violently suppressing opposition. That's what they're doing, and that's fascist. Let's get our terms straight. And folks, I just wish those on the other side would stop referring to us as terrorists. I mean, last night we had at least probably 60 families representative at this council meeting, and half of them had their children with them. They're the ones that go out to these abortion clinics. This is nothing more than trying to stir up opposition to pro-lifers. So, folks, the city council thing, let me tell you where we're headed with that. Let me wrap up with this. This buffer zone, this bubble zone, if you will, this attempt to keep people from saying mean things to folks out front of an abortion clinic is hopefully never going to see the light of day. Despite the fact that the city council in Toledo is dominated by Democrats who are pro-abortion, there are a few folks on that council who revere the First Amendment and believe that folks, even if they disagree with their position on abortion, have the right to speak in front of an abortion clinic. Thank goodness, right? There still are Democrats who believe in the First Amendment. So we're hoping that abortion in an abortion clinic in Toledo, that the case will be heard in front of the Supreme Court justices here in Ohio as to whether a transfer agreement is required for them to stay in operation. Right now, they're unable to find a local hospital that will provide them that agreement, that agreement that every ambulatory surgical center needs to stay in business. So we're hoping that we're going to have a good verdict. We won't know on the 12th, obviously. They'll hear the case, the oral arguments, and then they'll come out with their ruling later, probably in this the fall. So we're going to find out more. And I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, of course, that this continues on in court as the other side makes appeals and so forth. But we'll be following that case as well. So bottom line is this. We got a busy schedule coming up this fall with this Toledo abortion mill. Plus, we'll be going to college campuses as usual this semester, taking victim photography out to engage students in speech on abortion and debate and dialogue. So be praying for us. We've got a very aggressive schedule, which will also include the use of our Jumbotron television showing abortion victim imagery, videos, and still photographs across America. So we're trying to do what we can to get people to engage on this topic in a peaceable way, right? Civil discourse, not violence like Antifa, not trying to shut people down by issuing buffer zones or silencing or chilling free speech. That's not what we're about. We want more speech, not less. So, folks, be following us. You can follow us here on Create Equal's Facebook page, or you can go to createdequal.org and tune in every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time here on this Facebook page and other social media platforms for the Mark Harrington Show, your radio activist and voice of resistance. We'll see you next time. God bless you. God bless America. And remember, America, to bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist. For more information on how to become a witness against the evil plague in America, call Created Equal at 614-269-7808, 614-269-7808, or go online to createdequal.net, createdequal.net. Be sure to tune to The Mark Harrington Show next time for your marching orders in the culture war.